All right. Well, let's give folks a second here to enter. Welcome everybody to the SCORES Poetry Summit, Words in Action, turning the, looking at poetry, the beauty, the playfulness of poetry, and the transformative power of poetry. So really excited about this session today. We have this session, revisions, talking about poetry in different settings in a way to help people overcome obstacles, to create new narratives, to come together, to experience joy. So we're really excited about this, Jenna. And before we get started, I want to remind people we've got a great lineup of sessions today, tomorrow, and Friday, really looking into all the nooks and crannies of poetry and spoken word and its transformative power. So we invite people to join us for the live sessions. And then again, all these will be available on replay as part of an archive. So we invite people today to participate. There'll be Q&A. Jen is going to present a little bit, and then there'll be time for Q&A. And we invite people to join in for that, either in the chat or even we can bring you on camera if that works. And I want to thank all of our partners here before we jump in. The committee, Alicia behind the scenes is pulling all these stuff together, Angela on the poetry team here. I want to thank our sponsors, Soma Equity Partners, the SAC Brand Group, for making this all possible. Also want to remind people that somebody here is going to win 2 tickets, a prize, a raffle prize. Every live session, we're giving away a raffle prize, 2 tickets to our Rising Voices event, where we have the Poet Athletes of America Scores, featuring some of their work. And we have some SCORES swag to go with that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenna. Jenna's part of the Bay Area creative team. We've had some wonderful sessions with Patrick and Mike on that team, also available on the archive, talking about spoken word, talking about poetry as a team sport. And now we have revisions. And Jenna, who is previewed with us an amazing presentation about her work with Bay Area Creative. And if we get lucky, she might pull down a ukulele, the electric ukulele, and give us, some storytelling. I don't know. We'll see how it all goes. But Jenna, let me turn it over to you. And just if you would introduce yourself, just give us a little bit of who you are, and then we can jump into the revisions program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Colin. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you for inviting Bay Area Creative as a collective to this summit. We're really honored to be a part in partnership with your organization. I think what you do is really at the root of not just creativity, but also like full body healing. Talk about creativity and moving and being an athlete and being in community and collaboration. Like that's what we're about at Bay Area Creative too, especially in revisions. So yeah, this really feels kind of at home in community with you. So thank you. I see that we have like only a couple people here, and I have a feeling it's because it's so early. And I appreciate the people who are coming out, and then to whoever watches this recording, thank you for seeking us out and learning more about what we do. So my name is, just briefly, my name is Jenna Robinson. I am an associate marriage and family therapist and spoken word performer, spoken word poet with Bay Area Creative. I'm a teaching artist at Bay Area Creative. I also have been working as a therapist for the past 2 years. I work at a domestic violence agency as well, doing a lot of stuff, different hats. I graduated from CIAS, California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco in the Expressive Arts Therapy program. And what you'll see is a lot of our work is rooted in the teachings of that school, in that methodology. So I'm really open to any questions that people have. Maybe we can have more of a discussion towards the end of the presentation. Okay, if I share.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So revision started, let me just go this. It's our family therapeutic arts program. We don't just serve families, but we do focus on families. And I think part of family too is we offer intergenerational community writing workshops. Sometimes we just work with youth. It's more rare that revisions works just with youth. We really prioritize doing intergenerational work and community and collaborative work. There's a lot of reasons for that. Part of that is the cross-generational learning. Everybody has such different insights and creative abilities across generations. So we actually learn better when we learn with somebody older or younger than us. And there's also a lot more joy and play when we work with people from a different generation than us. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so the origins of revisions was kind of the melding of Patrick and I. We met at Berkeley Slam. I moved here from Hawaii to go to the Expressive Arts Therapy program at CIIS. I had been working as a poet facilitator, slam poet facilitator in Hawaii with Pacific Tongues, as well as as working with Girls Court Hawaii, which is a specialty court just for adjudicated girls in Hawaii. It's actually a really intensive wraparound service. And what I was learning with Girls Court, not just the power of doing writing workshops, because I was doing that a lot with the youth and also with service providers, but Girls Court's methodology was that you had to work with the family. Kids end up in trouble, end up with problems, not because of anything wrong or defective about the kid, but there's something about the system. There's a larger issue happening. And not just that the issue is in the system, but the system is the one that needs the help. If the system can survive, if the system feels supported, the system will support the kid. And what I mean by system is whoever is in the family, whoever is taking care of the kid, the youth, whether that's parents, other types of caregivers, grandparents, uncles, aunts, close family members who the family has brought in as chosen family. Whatever the system is, there is this large network actually that takes care of the youth. So if that network, if that system can feel supported and healed, the youth will strive. So revision started with Patrick and myself taking our backgrounds in spoken word poetry as performers and as teaching artists, and my background at CIAS to provide services for families. No one really does this work. It's hard to do with families. Often we focus on an individual, whether that's youth or adults. It's a little bit harder to do collaborative writing, and especially with families who have a lot of trauma and a lot of conflict. There's a lot of issues that come up. So it is kind of hard to navigate as a facilitator. But we wanted to offer this service because, one, how cool, being able to do that. And to be with families. Patrick and I have, had such an amazing experience being with people in their stories, hearing the trauma that they've been through, and then also the resiliency and being the people that help them see their strengths and utilize their strengths that they've had the whole time, right? It's been amazing work. We've done, as revision started, really just kind of conceptualizing ourselves as an organization. We started at Safe and Sound in San Francisco. It used to be called the San Francisco Child Abuse Prevention Center when we first started there. So we piloted our program there at Safe and Sound, and we offered, gosh, I think our first thing was an 8-week writing workshop for families. Each week was different activities, and we always did it in groups. It wasn't just that we worked with one family. We worked with like 4 to 7 families at a time. And they would do collaborative writing together. Sometimes we would separate them by ages. So the youth doing some writing or activities together and the adults doing writing activities together. We felt like building rapport with peers would be instrumental to the collaboration as a whole. So then we bring the families together, they do writing together. And then we'd also do separate, we'd break them out into family dyads, into their parent-child dyads, and do work with them that way. SF Safe and Sound didn't have teenagers. Patrick and I were used to working with adolescents, and we were hoping to pilot the program with parents and adolescents, but they have youth and tweens, which we really didn't have experience doing writing workshops with 8, 9-year-olds and their parents. So there was a big learning curve for us, especially not just developmentally, but with all the different trauma responses and neurodiversity things that popped up with that population. We learned a lot really fast. Yeah. And how to make, I think the main thing we learned is that we could create a curriculum, we could create something structured or that we keep going back to, but it has to be moldable, it has to be flexible, it has to be able to meet each family, each person, each family, each group where they're at, which is very different. So revisions is, we can talk about a curriculum, we could talk about a methodology and way of being, but revisions really is about training the facilitator to be with the clients, to be with the families. Okay. So in that, why spoken word? I have a quote here: anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. This is a core part, not of just like therapeutic work, but specifically poetry therapy and narrative therapy. There's something really important about naming what's going on. Because once you can name it, it's more manageable. The things that are very scary, unmanageable, are the things we're ashamed of, the things we're ashamed to name, things we're ashamed to talk about, that we don't know how to talk about. It's uncontrollable if we can't. What I really like about this quote too is the part about the people we trust with that talk. So as an agency, as a community, we're hoping to create those spaces where we can be the people that they share that talk, those stories with, but also where we can create community and create rapport within families to share that talk. We're really hoping to create protective factors between parents and their kids, where kids feel more willing to talk to their parents about what's going on, to understand that their parent will see them and understand them, won't take it out on them, or maybe the child could feel like the parent can overreact and not actually hear what's going on. So part of the work we do is developing that voice, developing the storytelling, so that we build rapport within families. We purposely use joy, art, and play to highlight the resiliency with families with histories of trauma. Revisions is cool because we don't just do writing. We do writing, we do performance and spoken word, but because we work with all ages, we do a lot of art, we do a lot of play with whatever kind of toys and materials we can get our hands on. We can do drama activities or movement activities, especially for warm-ups and performance work. Because once again, like whatever works, right? Music too. Quite a few of our facilitators have skill with hip hop or songwriting, so we can meet people where they're at that way as well. Part of our stuff too for bringing families together is to talk about like multiple truths within the family and working on a shared family narrative. Not everybody agrees on what happened and what the story of the family is. So how can we create spaces where there's a multiplicity in the story, as well as a cohesive truth at the same time, which is interesting to navigate. And often I think what we see is that because of that, sometimes it's the first time parents or kids hear a part of the family story, family narrative. Maybe it's the first time a parent hears something about the kid, their perspective on a certain event, or just as the child is developing their identity, parent learns new things because of the activities we have, brings out different parts of everybody. So each person, the youth and the parent, are learning new things about each other that we don't necessarily bring up in normal conversation. When we did our work at Safe and Sound, we did actually, I think 9 weeks with the family. There's a 2-hour workshop and 2 hours is like an hour and a half of actual writing and working. But we always did some sort of a dinner or sharing of food. I know that's hard right now with COVID. We don't get to break bread with each other, but there's something really important about providing food. Not just generally with families, but especially with traumatized or, with traumatized families. A lot of times they're juggling a lot. They're experiencing difficulty with managing school and work. So providing spaces where we feed them and take care of them, where they can rest and then engage creatively, shows the most like benefits. We see the most of impact and effect. That way people are more likely to come out too, right, when there's a meal. Families work together to create original pieces of writing that promote pride in themselves, pride in the community, while contributing to solid familial bonds. They work through conflict and to achieve whatever goal setting that they've established at the beginning. Families, which is really cool, support each other in the process, right? So because we did the peer development and then brought them together as families, the families are there with each other, helping each dyad, working through stuff. It really encourages a lot of emotional honesty between the adults and youth in constructive ways. And we talk about ways to be honest without overburdening each other. Just some of the protective factors that we work towards is social connection, so emotional support of each other, empathy building, and the social and emotional competence of children. And in that is working on self-esteem, self-confidence, especially through public speaking and performance, self-efficacy, self-regulation, and self-control. A lot of these things we work on through performance. Like in order to tell their story, we do a lot of coping skills and regulation. Personal agency, executive functioning, patience, persistence in finishing a poem or finishing a story to completion, to actually performing it, and different type of communication skills, social skills, and conflict resolution within the family unit or in the group. So one of the reasons why we do this work, and we feel that it's important to do it therapeutically, is because of the impact that trauma has on our brain. Trauma affects the communication part of the brain and also our creative part. Trauma steals your voice. It's a quote by Nikita Gill. It literally does make things unspeakable, unknowable, understandable. So back to kind of that quote from Mr. Rogers, we can identify things and name things. It takes a lot of the power away from trauma, but trauma takes that. It makes it so hard to name things, and that's shame. That's the incomprehensible. Our brain doesn't even know what's going on enough to name it. And then what's really important about expressive arts and spoken word therapeutic modalities is that trauma affects the creative part of our brain. It steals our or affects our ability to problem solve, to think creatively. We start to lose hope. So these types of activities really heal that part of our brain. And we're not thinking about the trauma or the real issue. So it's, which can be kind of confusing to the brain. It makes it really hard to heal the problem solving part of the brain with the problem. So if we do it in these auxiliary ways, we're problem solving by learning how to use haiku. How do we fit our story into this formula? That gives us these like alternative auxiliary ways to heal the brain so that we can address trauma through a problem solving approach or a creative problem solving approach. All of our writing workshops are intermodal, like I was talking about before. Intermodal meaning that we use multiple arts. There's a lot of healing in the liminal space between one art to another. So it's not just the writing, right? There's something that happens, this magical thing that happens when we move from writing to performance. So from writing to movement, the way that we translate that to the other art form connects different parts of our brain, which contributes to the healing from trauma. Okay. I wanted to actually share about this picture here. This is a collaborative poem making that we did. We'll do like exquisite, it's called exquisite corpse poems, where one person is just writing a line based off of the one line before them, and you build a poem off of that, not knowing what the like line before the one right before yours is. And you see this kind of intuitive poem that shows up. Some of the many therapeutic features of poetry is the authentic voice, which invites a reader or audience engagement. It's a concise form loaded with choice words, which is really important. How can we synthesize things down, choosing specific words? And part of that is also in the narrative therapy approach, which I'll talk about after. How can we shift the words we use? The words we use are really important. Saying that there's a lot of darkness in our family. What does darkness mean? Where did that come from? Who told you that? What's your family's history with darkness? We don't come with all those questions all at once. It's like a long process. But darkness came from somewhere. That word is important. So how can we work with that, right? We're not going to invalidate it, say that it's wrong, not use it. We want to use it, but what's the relationship with that word? And is there ways that we can choose other words in collaboration with that word? Can we make shifts? And we do that a lot through metaphor and different poetic devices. A lot of our work is in figurative language and metaphor and creative poetic devices. Something about white space and silence, especially in spoken word poems, when we have so much that we're listening to, so much oral presentation, when there's silence, can really be effective and moving. So how can we use that purposely, especially when we're talking about trauma? Where does silence show up? How can we move it, use it as also a part of the creative process? And I want to say just briefly, the biggest part of this is taking your story back, that you are the author, that you are the creator of your story, that you have a right to your authorship, especially with abuse someone else is telling your story, has told you who you are and what the trauma means, what the abuse means. So the biggest part of our work is taking that story back, as individuals and as family. How can the family as a collective take the story back? We have a real person-centered approach. So all these features are adaptable and show up differently in each workshop. We train all of our facilitators to flow with the family and the group dynamic. And the facilitator often holds the hope for the group, for the family. Not everybody has the ability to see that hope and problem-solving skills at the beginning. So the facilitator really needs to join the family to really understand the dynamic and to help the family or the group to reauthor their story. And what's not here, and we really emphasize, is not just the writer, not just the performer, but we really teach people to be empathetic listeners, helping them listen and speak, because both are really important to healing and democracy. Yeah, okay. All right. So our approach is really based in narrative therapy as well. So these are some of the stages of narrative therapy, mapping the problem. So first we got to name the problem. What is the problem? I'm going to say problem. So let's say the problem is abuse. So we're going to name it. Does it have a different name besides abuse? We can be creative with that. Abuse is darkness, or abuse is the volcano, whatever. We're going to map the history of that problem. How long has that problem been around in your life, in your family's life? How has it impacted your life? And we're going to externalize it. Poetry and creative writing is wonderful for this part of narrative therapy. So to externalize means to take the problem and put it outside of yourself. Well, the ways we do that is with personification, metaphor. So if abuse is the problem, abuse is I'm gonna turn abuse into a person. So abuse is, or a thing. Abuse is the darkness that surrounds my home. Abuse is a rain cloud that follows me everywhere I go, only raining on me. So I'm gonna have, while abuse is still around, abuse is still in my life, abuse is not in me. We're not gonna internalize and be the problem. I am abused. I have an experience with abuse. And it seems small, but taking the problem outside of yourself is really important, because there's hope if we have relationship with something. There's less hope when it is just who we are. So we'll externalize, and there's a lot of work that happens there. And then we deconstruct the problem. So wonderful part about narrative therapy and this postmodern approach is that they really take critically oppression, and that the problem isn't always actually a problem. The problem usually is a consequence of oppression and difficulty in the world. So how can we actually see maybe that the problem is a consequence of the system and not anything defective about you? So it's not that you are depressed. You have a relationship with depression. Depression's in your life, and depression sounds like it's a consequence of being abused by systems of oppression. So often I identifying patriarchy. So people with masculine power, presenting masculine power, feeling like they have the ability to own or control people in their environment. So naming that, calling that out. There's nothing wrong with you. There's a system that exists that says something's wrong with you and that you can be taken advantage of. So this deconstruction part is a huge part of our work with families, just to help them see that they're very capable people. Our society and system says they aren't, or something's defective about them. So even just these three pieces is a huge part of the healing process. We could really stop here, and people be in a way better position that they were when they first came to our group. But it's still this very wonderful second half. And this isn't linear. Don't get me wrong, we can do all of this in different parts. Highlighting unique outcomes isn't invalidating people's experience with trauma or struggle, but it's to really highlight that trauma or whatever problem that they're struggling with isn't around all the time, isn't the entire part of the story. There are these moments where they are capable. And if there are these moments, if we can poke holes in the dominant story that someone is hopeless or depressed or incapable, if we could poke holes that, oh, you've been very capable, you've had a job for years and been very worked hard to go to work and to do your best there. You've worked really hard to show up at school, even though it's really difficult and you have to, and you get bullied there, and learning is hard for you, you still go. Like, that's huge. We're really celebrating and emphasizing people's strengths alongside what they've gone through. And all that we do to actually create new stories, which is the reauthoring part. If there are times when depression or abuse isn't totally dominating your story, if we can see the problem as outside of yourself, we can see that the problem is a consequence of oppression and the society you live in. If we do all those pieces, then let's take another look at your story and edit the narrative you've been telling yourself, or the narrative that your family has been holding. If we can name those things, the story is different. There's more a story of empowerment. There's more a story of resilience than there is just of trauma. And this last part, definitional ceremonies, is that we need to actually have a witness. So narrative therapy is wonderful because it's, once again, not just about telling the story and editing, reauthoring your story, but it's that we need to have witnesses to see us in our new story, to hear our new stories. And spoken word is really a wonderful vehicle for this, because we're actually speaking the story out, we're performing the story, and there's a built-in witness. The witness is a huge part. I love spoken word, I love slam, because the audience, the witness, is just as important as the poet. There needs to be the call and response. There needs to be the affirmation to kind of concretize the truth, the story, the new story. There's all these witnesses to see you in your new truth, and to celebrate you in it. So every time we do a workshop, we don't just do a writing workshop, we don't just do performance work, we always end with some sort of ceremony and celebration and community, so that they can really honor each other and celebrate each other in the work they've done, but also in witnessing them in their new individual and family stories. Not new, well, it's a little new, yeah, in their revitalized narratives, and more complicated stories than just the negative, dominant problem saturated story. And we are not developing anything really. These are not tools that are special to us, but we're actually just helping individuals become aware of the skills that they already have, and have been using, and maybe to lean into more, yeah, and to celebrate that they have them. So aside from families, we do work intergenerationally in community. We did this wonderful pilot program between Skyline High School and Mercy Retirement Home. So elders and adolescents. And we do this in other places as well, and hope to do it other places as well. So we do collaborative poetry writing, collaborative art making intergenerationally. We can do fictional story writing, real life storytelling, letter writing, and music and hip hop. One time we did work at Alameda Family Justice Center, in the detention facilities. Sometimes we do writing between the corrections officer and the youth there, which was really fun, to build that rapport across power, across generations, really humanize each other. So what we did at Mercy was really phenomenal. It was a multi-system, multi-step approach. So first, we went into Mercy Retirement Home, and we helped elders identify a story that they wanted to pass on to youth and taught them some storytelling skills. So like beginning, middle, and end. What is the conflict? The rising action. Is there any sort of resolution? Why is this the story that you want to share? Is there some sort of larger lesson in the story that's really important for you to communicate? And part of that is elders have these lessons that they feel really compelled to share, these morals about their lives, these things that they've experienced that they really want to impart on people just starting their lives, their adulthood. And what's cool about Mercy Retirement Home in Oakland is there's a lot of retired clergy, and nuns. There's a lot of retired nuns there, and also people with really diverse trauma backgrounds. Some of the people we saw at Mercy, one woman was in a Japanese internment camp and really wanted to tell that story. We had someone who was a Korean War veteran who really wanted to tell stories about that, as well as his spiritual awakening after. Wonderful, rich stories. So we worked with them first, and then simultaneously, actually, Patrick and I would go to Skyline High School, doing poetry workshops, and we ran a slam. And whoever won the slam, the top 4 people had the opportunity to be on the team, but also to do work at Mercy in this, in this activity. We're pretty excited to do that. So we I think we ended up bringing about 6 or 7 people, 5 youth from the school and a couple college students to Mercy, and their job, their role was to interview the elder on the story that they had learned how to tell, that they wanted to tell. So the youth were taking notes and interviewing them, making connections, as you can see in this picture here. So first we had to teach the youth some interview skills, some active listening, reflective listening skills, make sure that they were getting all the parts of the story that they needed or that was important, as well as some of the auxiliary sensory details, right? Because we're gonna do some creative writing. We wanna get some extra material as well. So after they do the interview, we all met together with the youth to talk about the personal process, actually making a personal connection to the elder's story, like why, not just what is the story, but like, how do you see yourself in the story? Like, what are the parts that you connect to, whether that's about the moral, the actual trauma, or resiliency in the story? Like, what is it that you're connecting to? So after they build that personal connection, they write a poem, right? They have to write some poem about the story. And then they brought that back to Mercy and performed the poems for the elders. Sorry, that was kind of hitting me. It was one of the most like meaningful experiences I've ever been a part of, when the elders got to receive those poems, hear those poems from the youth, and to process that with the youth. So a lot of the youth in their poems are making that personal connection. So they're honoring the elder, telling the story back to the elder in their words, but now they're also connecting. So students making connections of the oppression in their lives, living in East Oakland, to Japanese internment, people making connections to the trauma they've experienced, to what it was like to survive as a woman in the 50s, trying to figure out how to be a nun while also getting your education. Like, there are all these different stories that people were connecting to, and the youth were really proud of that they could give the stories back. So weren't just teaching people to write their stories, we're teaching them how to listen, how to connect to other people's stories, and be with each other, to be with each other in their stories and their trauma. And the youth then learn how to emphasize the resiliency of the elder too. Wonderful process. I think a lot of elders are ignored and silenced in our society. So and youth too, oh my gosh. So these two groups who are really cast aside, coming together and sharing story was really beautiful. Yeah, can't recommend it more if you have an opportunity to create these spaces intergenerationally, people who don't know each other, but we do know each other in our stories. So just some general considerations. Developmental stage, different poems, different activities work for different folks. 8-year-olds are gonna have a harder time with metaphor than a 16-year-old. So, choosing the metaphor, a poetic device that's appropriate. And then also making sure, if you're working with a family or intergenerational group, activities that each person can do. So if a 6-year-old can maybe do more of the play, the art, the drama, and the parent or the elder, the older youth can maybe do a little bit more of the writing. How can they all collaborate in those processes? Also neurodiversity, like everybody has different brains and different learning capacities and needs. So really seeing that as best as you can, working with it. We've worked with a lot of kids on the spectrum who just, need different tools, different ways of telling stories. They're going to attach to different parts of the poetic process. Maybe they're going to want to tell a story more than write a poem. Being flexible with what works with people. I think we had one kid who really wanted to use his computer. So we're like, bring your computer. Oh my gosh, we don't have to write. We don't have to perform. Like, whatever works for you. You want to create a video? Let's do it. Different literacy and language differences in groups and in families. How can you honor and bring out those differences while not shaming or making someone feel less than because of the differences? Does the word have to be written? Often we don't. We really emphasize things being spoken. If people don't want to actually write because they have difficulties around it, just talk to them. Ask them to freestyle a story, a poem. Maybe there's someone who can write and with them and feed them lines or feed them key points. A lot of kids, a lot of adults have bad experiences in school, and these groups remind them of that learning, of that difficulty. And a lot of fears around documentation. Working in the detention centers, a lot of those youth did not want to write their story on paper. They don't want proof. They don't want that documented. So really was about just being in the moment and hearing them tell their stories. Any activities we bring, we want to match the mood as much as possible while also bringing them out, bringing things that can bring them towards more of their goals. And when in doubt, and you don't know a poem or activity to bring, you're not exactly sure culturally what makes sense for the group, ask them to bring in stuff that they like and enjoy. Yeah, okay. And then I think just lastly tell you about our actual group model. So we always do some sort of check-in, some sort of warm-in. Often each of these activities are building off of each other. So the warm-in or check-in might be a metaphor check-in, like how are you feeling today, based using the weather as a metaphor. I'm feeling really sunny, having a great day. Feeling kind of cloudy. There's a lot of rainstorms on the horizon. you know, building that, warming them into the creative devices. Then we actually teach a creative device, introduce a tool like rhyme, rhythm, metaphor. Uh, yeah, maybe we'll play with it a little bit. We talk about a theme. Then we have a discussion, encouraging some sort of personal engagement with the theme, highlighting group dynamics, give them an invitation to write, and we offer prompts or give some sort of poem skeleton, because often the hardest part about writing a poem is starting. So we'll give them a lot of scaffolding to start the poem. And then always there's some invitation to share out and give insight on performance. But the sharing out we do also, this is where we teach a lot of group members how to be active listeners, how not to judge a poem, teach them how to highlight the connections and the empathy and how something moved them, versus just like whether someone did something that they liked or if something is, you know, quote unquote good. And then we always have some sort of closing activity. And lastly, actually back to the poetic device. The poetic device, sometimes people are like, why, you know, why would you really hone in on that? The poetic device is a container and can create some aesthetic distance between the person and the problem or the story, as well as it's an actual tool to tell the story. And it helps them focus on something else, to problem solve on something else besides the problem. So if we work on, you know, fitting into a haiku, our creativity, our juices, our free association might be working a little bit without our knowledge, right? Without our awareness of the insights, the emotional insights that could come out of that. Okay, I think that's it.
Come back on here, Jenna. Give you some snaps here. This thank you so much. This was really informative, really inspiring. I mean, it's a master class, a master presentation on that involves so many things, so many thoughtful ingredients here. So I just can't say how much you know, we appreciate you putting that together and sharing it. And shout out to Patrick, who I'll invite, you know, I'll invite into the conversation here as well, for just, you know, putting this together. Like, it is so rich and so meaningful and so powerful. You know, you can just see how this can really change lives. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and you know, this let me just be clear, we're playing to the people who are going to see this as a replay, as you know, it's as an archive. And you know, this will be a must-see for our scores coaches, our mentors, our facilitators, to use that word, you know, who are facilitating these group activities, and to start to push that envelope on what's possible in terms of intergenerational activity and family involvement, right? So it's really, again, just you're taking the lid off kind of what's possible for groups like Scores and people using poetry as therapy and empowerment. So again, really just appreciate you sharing that. But let's bring in Patrick, who's been hiding, you know, quietly behind the Zoom curtain there. I'll give Neelish, who's from our board of directors of American Scores. He's a caregiver, a doctor, working with youth as well. So Neelish, I don't know if you're in the clinic or what, but you're welcome to come and jump in here too. And of course, Angela, Alicia, if you've got questions, Alexa. This is just, we're gonna have 10 minutes here, but let's try to focus a little bit on like the facilitator. Like, I just, you know, that, talk about brave spaces, talk about like safe spaces and brave spaces, and the tools, the wherewithal, the competency you need to have to step into that and be ready to manage you know, emotions and all these different things. I mean, just, you know, who are these heroes? Like, what kind of competencies and characteristics do these facilitators need to have?
I'll say a little bit about it, and then maybe Patrick can share too. Really, it's people who have their own trauma histories, their own trauma stories, and learn to kind of tell those and work through those in their own performance work. Right, and we have to build coping skills in order to do that ourselves, right? Like the poems I've told, I gotta breathe, right? Like if something's coming up, I gotta breathe and calm down in order to finish my poem. So there's some skills that they already build as performers and writers themselves. I think it's just I think while being able to do that, the people that we've worked with have been also very joyful while also holding that kind of social justice oppression lens. A lot of the people we work with have named those underlying dynamics, because that's important to work with the family. We can't just see people as problems. We have to see them as a part of these larger systems at play, while also being very joyful and playful ourselves. Patrick, I don't know if you've seen Patrick, is a very playful guy. Like, we're seeing you work with some 8-year-olds who did not want to be there, just juggling, throwing anything there to make it work. Jamie is like that too, another one of our facilitators, very joyful, playful, creative person, while also being very strong and empowered in his voice and his story. I think people that are courageous enough to name what's going on in their life while also being, playful. And I think what's great that Patrick and I have created from the get-go is a lot of space to debrief. Because we can't just, every group is different, right? So we have to talk about what just happened. What can we learn? What did Patrick see? What did I see? What did Jamie see? We've had a couple other people work with us too. What just happened? We teach the service providers that we work with too in the modalities so that they can share with us what happened. And then we're constantly adapting and meeting different needs. So there are people, all of us are willing to take very critical, constructive feedback, right? And work with it. Does that sound right, Patrick?
Totally. I got so much to add. I think, like Jenna mentioned at the beginning of the talk, we met at the Berkeley Slam, right? The poetry slam. And so much of that playfulness and courage, I think, is embodied in the slam, because it is a game that you do at a bar with a rowdy audience, but the poems that most people are sharing are some heavy poems, talking about personal trauma, talking about institutional state-based trauma, talking about historical oppression, in a way that is held in that community, both as a thing for entertainment and as a thing for coming together and really listening to each other and really being held in that community of artists and the audience. And I think that was where Jenna and I really got the idea for, doing this work, is to try and reproduce that community without the competition, because in a therapeutic setting, we're not trying to do a competition, but we can definitely bring that playfulness and intensity and active listening, to that. So I think, anyone who's interested in trying to do poetry therapy ought to take themselves to the poetry slam and put themselves in that soup, and put themselves on that stage and really see what it's like to combine this playful high energiness with this talking about some real stuff and really doing personal transformation. Like Jenna said, if you're not performing that poem and you have to take a breath to catch yourself within it, and you're trying to do poems that are addressing trauma, then it's going to be really hard to hold that safe space for someone else. Totally. And be in that brave space for someone else, unless you've actually done it yourself and been also within a community of artists who are doing that on a weekly basis, which you find at the Berkeley Poetry Slam and the Oakland Poetry Slam, who are run by past students of our program. And they've been going on since the 1990s. That me and Jenna, Jenna came up in Hawaii with the Poetry Slam community, which is, the same kind of things as happening in the Bay, right? This is a national phenomenon, an underground culture, I think, that is really giving this therapeutic service. And so many people have poems about, the slam is my therapy. And we're like, no, you need a therapist for it to be therapy, but it sure is therapeutic.
Great.
Yeah. And I in that vein too, not just, I think people want to say the slam is their therapy, but you need a therapist. In our groups, so I operate as a therapist, but a lot of our facilitators are not. So we are offering therapeutic approaches. but there's something about the facilitator that's really important, because it is about the holding and the guidance that you're getting from somebody who's really with you, than just like the slam where you're kind of throwing it out to the audience kind of by yourself. While you are in community, you're also a little by yourself. Does that?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me ask, again, I'll invite others to jump in here, but it's a lot, it's a lot about voice, and, finding that voice, telling that story, right? Writing that new narrative, but listening, right? Particularly in this group setting, in a family setting, listening seems to be a very important part of it. And even for the facilitator, right? The facilitator has to be a skilled and deep listener. But and I'm just imagining, as like how hard it is to get this process even started, to get people willing maybe even to be in the space and start to talk, talk about things that they have not spoken about. So I have thousands of questions, but just on the listening piece of this, like, what's the, how important is that listening? How deliberate is that listening? And again, how does the facilitator make sure that happens, right? So that people are heard, that voice is heard.
It's huge. It's a huge part of it. And as a facilitator, we're not just listening to the story, we're listening to the things kind of underneath the story, seeing if there's some subtle nonverbal things too. So when I said joining the family, I think energetically we have to listen. What is happening when people don't want to talk? I worked with one family when the kid did not want to work with the mom, and the mom was also very resistant, and it was strange because they didn't seem like they had conflict, but they wouldn't work together. So I have to listen. I have to listen to the energy, or feel into the energy, by being with the discomfort of them not working together. What do we hear when a kid says he doesn't want to be there? Is it because he doesn't like writing, or is it because he has a learning disability that makes writing really difficult? So being there reminds him of a difficulty, a learning opportunity that he has. So how can we adapt, right? Because it's not actually that he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to feel ashamed. He doesn't want to feel not capable. You know what I mean? How can we listen into that and adapt? I think when we do that, they become so joyful. I mean, Patrick, I wonder if you know who I'm talking about, like some of the little kids who have ADHD, who want to throw everything and do not want to be there, but actually they do want to tell a story and be with their parent. You know what I mean? Like, but by writing it isn't the way. So there's listening to the actual story, and the way that we do that too is to teach people ways to comment on other people's poems, like always centering things in your experience. Like, I feel, I saw, this moved me, versus, oh yeah, I really liked your poem. I really liked that line. I thought it was really good the way you used metaphor. That's less helpful as a poet, as someone receiving that comment, than I was really moved by the line about your heart feeling something, because the emotional impact is much more important than like the tools or capability in the poetic device.
Mm-hmm.
We call it a reader response in the academic world. Sorry to cut you off. Are you saying more?
No, that's good.
And so, the idea is that, you're saying, like, here as an audience to your poem, here's how it impacted me. Rather than saying, oh, you did great, your poem's awesome, the metaphor is great. You're like, here's what I felt from hearing that. This line, I felt this way in this line. And then to validate it, to say, I know what kind of courage it takes to write that and how it takes to go there. In response, Colin, to your question about how to motivate people to go in like that, the first thing we do is always open up the workshop with a poem of our own that is a model of that happening, and really open that space in a brave, courageous, and lighthearted way. Even though, trauma poem is about a serious topic, there is a scintillating joy in performing that poem that the audience feels, you know, and they're like, wow, they're talking about this heavy thing. And they're not like, oh God, this thing's really heavy and hard for me to talk about. You know, you are in an empowered place and relishing almost in the revisioning of this traumatic experience yourself. And opening the workshop like that is absolutely crucial. And so again, I would say for anyone trying to do this work, you have to have done this work yourself. You have to have a poem like that, where that has been an alchemic experience that you've put yourself through and gone through and can demonstrate for the group. This is kind of what this is about. And of course, the people who are writing for their very first time aren't going to write that kind of a trauma poem, but just to kind of show them that's what this is, because they probably haven't seen that before, almost certainly haven't. You know, so you got to do that, I'd say, to start to open up the workshop. And then as far as how do you get people to do it, like Jenna said, you listen, you adapt, you're like, they don't want to write, let's draw a picture, you want to play some games, let's throw some darts at the board and then kind of talk about your thing, and then you tell me lines and I'll write them down. A lot of times just people have issue with the technology of actually writing, so you can act as the scribe for them and just let them talk, and then you write, and they'll be a little kid, and you're like, all right, you throw darts at the board, you tell me about this thing, and I'll ask you questions to make them into metaphors and whatever, and I'll write your poem down with my hands, but you're saying it out loud. You know, like these are some of the tricks of the trade that we discovered at working with the Safe and Sound, which is the first time we worked with kids of that age, and now we work with kindergarten age students all over the place. But it was that experience at the Family Writing Center where, you know, we were like, man, working with younger kids, I just loved it. The creativity is so, they just want to play, you know, and for me, that's where creativity comes from, is that playful, imaginative, curious place. And that's so much of a healing experience, I think.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. And I don't mean, we're getting a little tight on time here. We get a couple more minutes, but, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but could you give us like, I don't, or point us in the right direction to like see what you're talking about there, Patrick, about an opening, healing poem? I mean, is it something
you trauma poem?
Yeah, I feel like we should just have it.
I think Jenna should do it. Jenna, you want to do one? I mean, I could do one, or Jenna can do one. I don't know. Jenna's the expert here. If you're not ready though, Jenna, I can do it. I know that's a lot to just drop on someone.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, for sure. Okay. I could do this for sure.
You got it. I'm a professional.
I'm a professional. That's right. Okay. I am my father's daughter. Not in that stereotypical sense of daddy's little princess. Hell no. My father made me into a warrior, a soul on fire, superior to my older brothers, you see, because I have desire to inspire and will not retire until I acquire higher ground. This being you see in front of you has not always been a threat. Little girl with bouncing blonde curls, quick to quit before even breaking a sweat, crying about how I just can't do it. There's no such thing as can't. Robinsons don't quit. Can do, can do, can do. Oh my God, it was so annoying. Reluctantly, I absorbed each phrase like sun rays, occasionally blistering my mind, unable to conceive the meaning of the heat at the time. I admired him, as did everybody else, a charmer, a leader, a Caesar over own era. He could entertain and challenge you all within the same breath. I was proud just to hold my daddy's hand. Yet we are both Geminis to a T. Lonely in the company of dual souls, liable to veer, to contort to any sort of person at any given moment. See, that's just how passion is. A fire continues to burn, regardless the result, negative or positive. I remember when he disowned me, when my father loathed me, because I was already a lioness at the age of 10, and I would not stand for some man beating my mom and my brothers. Oh, he should blame himself for making me stronger than the others. So yes, I was the one who called child services. Court wouldn't let him be alone with us anymore. Every door had to remain open, hoping his rage would subside, but I knew otherwise. That little girl found no warm embrace, because when my dad looks into my face, he seems his own shame reflected in its place. My Christmas present that year, no more violence. Instead, rage and disappointment wrapped in silence. My little heart still burns. But I'm just as stubborn. As today I taught myself how not to cry, he did not deserve my weakness. My tears turned into an aversion of his perversion of fatherhood. I am my father's daughter, but I am not my father. I am open and sincere. I do not let my emotions steer my decisions. Y'all, I am smart and willing to listen. I'm strong, not controlling. I'm a charmer, not a manipulator. I'm a fighter, I'm a leader, but most importantly, since I am my father's daughter, I am a dreamer. Want to get to know me better? Go ahead and stare into the portals to my soul. These green eyes don't lie. Then again, that's one of the lies my father told. Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
thank you.
It's fun. Yeah. I don't even know how to respond to such powerful sharing. I mean, it's clapping, it's snapping, it's wow. And it's like, I need some Kleenex and it's,
In the
it's,
slam, we scream wildly at the end of the poem. The slam
Yeah.
is we don't snap. Snapping is a beat poetry thing. In the slam,
Yeah.
we say, "Get it, poet!" Yeah, and you scream and yell, and you let those emotions out, baby.
Yeah.
You yell at the top of your lungs at the end of a poem like that.
Can we do that on Zoom? I guess I don't know. It's like one person screaming. You only hear one person at a time.
Yeah, you can't get the thing,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But we'll be back in person soon.
Yeah.
Totally. And to the point, like, well, actually how people respond is also with their own story. Because now I've role modeled that this is okay. And I'm standing in front of you, a capable person. So you're like, oh, snap. Someone could have that story and still be here and teaching and doing all this stuff and be joyful and smiling. Like, dang, I'm ready to tell you something. And that's where actually we walk the line of disclosure, right? We want to tell enough of our story to make it this accessible, but it's also not about us. Like, we want to tell enough to get it going, but not be like, this is now the Jenna show. You know what I mean? Like, we're in this all together. We're in it all together, which is a little different than therapy that has a little bit more of a neutral stance.
Yeah. No, you're there. You're in it. You're vulnerable and sharing. So I see the power of that. So thank you for sharing that. That was of narration, of the power of narration, of power of healing, and how spoken word can do that. So we got there. What a masterful presentation. Appreciate you both for all the work that you do. You're pioneers. You're on the cutting edge of something that the masses need. Right. This is not just for this setting or that setting. This is healing for all of us. And so consider us on the team here just to get this stuff going. In any which way we can. And we'll definitely spread the word about this session and share the good work that you guys are doing. Patrick, thank you for putting that email in there. If there's any other links, or things that we can point people to, please share with us. We'll get that as well. Jenna, I'll give you the last word here. Anything you can leave us with, or anything's up and coming you want to share about? Just take us home.
Once again, thank you. Like, deep gratitude for being invited to this. Like I said, I think we're very similar wavelengths about community and team and doing physicality along with storytelling. The work you do is really groundbreaking itself. And to Alicia's point about wanting to get families getting involved, we usually work with community organizations and kind of give our resources to whatever families exist at a nonprofit, but we are looking to expand, and we would love to have ongoing family groups running. So if anybody has referrals or is interested, please go to bayareacreative.org or contact Patrick is a perfect person to contact at director@bayareacreative.org for those referrals, so that we can start something just kind of ongoing. Like you said, pioneer, but we need to have people and resources to actually really get it off the ground. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, folks. Well, we'll wrap it with that, and look forward to seeing you maybe at some other of our Poetry Summit sessions.
And then someday we'll have our ukulele summit,
Oh, yeah,
storytelling
that's
summit with the featuring Jenna and the electric ukulele. We're looking
Yeah.
forward to that coming up soon.
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
All right, right on. You guys have a great one. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you.